I need to be a little mean in this video, and I have avoided doing that so far for quite a while now, but here it becomes unavoidable. Normally, I would just shelve the whole idea because it required me being mean, but in the year of our Lord, 2024, the takedown has become the event of the year. Whether it be the year starting out with H-Bomber's destruction of James Somerton, and Tom the Shadow adding to said destruction, or this being followed up by Kendrick Lamar destroying Drake. Within that same time period was even Jenny Nicholson criticizing Disney park rides and hotel thing, whatever. And all of this followed up by Dan Olsen's takedown of the takedown video. And I want in on the takedown, damn it! For me though, it's just going to be going back to a normal, comfortable area of talking about Miraculous, Ladybug, and the other people who make videos on it. No, we are not talking about Cyrus the Great. This time, the man writes his own takedown videos. Like, it does not take much thought to really deconstruct the problem with these criticisms, but they really aren't meant to be thought about.
Did you know that in Miraculous Ladybug, in the Season 3 episode The Puppeteer 2, Marinette willingly kissed Adrian on the lips after reciting an unsettling poem, while knowing that that is just a wax statue? Many people, including Adrian himself and the writers, have tried to defend Marinette in this situation by justifying what she did, saying that she's only a teen, I would do that as well and all that stuff, but here is a justification to end all justifications. You see, the real reason why Marinette did that is because of no reason other than the simple fact that Marinette is a stupid fucking whore.
These videos are made by Cyrus to farm views from people so mad at Miraculous that they really no longer can think straight about Miraculous. No, instead I'm talking about Smarty Pants' Mary Sue videos, because it has some actual attempts at criticism and convinced me that the Mary Sue may not exist like we think it does. Smarty Pants gives 4 rules or ways of determining if a character is a Mary Sue. And these are, 1,
they are essentially perfect. All their endeavors succeed. They're talented, popular, and beloved. Nice characters always love and adore them. Mean characters hate them with the burning passion of 1,000 suns.
1, they are essentially perfect. Pants clarifies here that there are 3 distinct character attributes. All their endeavors succeed. They are talented, popular, and beloved. Nice characters love them, and mean characters hate them. 2.
On to indicator 2, Mary Sues are always right and make the correct decision. If they do happen to make a mistake, it doesn't matter because it's immediately rectified or it's shown that it was meant to happen like that. Anytime they could have a character building mistake, it's turned into a positive.
Mary Sues are always right and make the right decisions. Pants also adds that if a Mary Sue does make a mistake, it is instantly rectified. And also, anytime they could have a character building mistake, it turns into a positive.
Indicator 3 is that the character makes other characters look terrible in comparison or behave out of character to shape the narrative to suit the Mary Sue. Other characters suddenly become incompetent to show off how smart or strong the character is. It doesn't matter if it's a teammate or an enemy, whenever a Mary Sue is around, their abilities always fail, and Mary Sue gets to shine.
3. The Mary Sue makes other characters terrible in comparison to suit the Mary Sue. There is some clarification given here by Pants, but there are no other additives to this definition, at least that I noticed. Basically, they say that if there are other characters around the Mary Sue will be the one who gets to show off in the end. 4.
Backstory that makes you feel sympathy for the Mary Sue and makes them look impressive for overcoming it.
Is just simply a tragic backstory that makes the Mary Sue look impressive. And I kind of like these dimensions because what really is a Mary Sue? A Mary Sue is a trope, right? And what a trope is meant to do is be a useful tool of objective measurement of subjective storytelling. In simple application, a trope can either be there or isn't there. In that case, I still give a generous passing grade to what Smarty Pants is doing here. It is an attempt to give an objective measurement of whether something is a Mary Sue or not in a story. It is not perfect. It does not really tell you if something is a Mary Sue or not, just whether it leans Mary Sue or not. Still, it gives some form of measurement. But hold on. The more I think about the definitions, the more I wonder, where did Smarty Pants get those definitions from? Well, Smarty Pants says they got their definitions from varying wikis and discussion boards. And while I cannot easily or realistically find the discussion board conversations, easily is the key word here. This was meant to be an easy project. But I can do some really good guessing for the wiki. Wikipedia on Mary Sue, which just states, a Mary Sue who is often portrayed as inexplicably competent across all domains, gifted with unique talents or powers, liked or respected by most other characters, unrealistically free of weakness, extreme attractiveness, innately virtuous, and generally lacking meaningful character flaws. This nails everything for Rule 1, but the other rules get a little more tricky. I looked to a Studio Binders article that came after Smarty Pants' video, but still agrees with the Rule 4 and seemingly Rule 1 list. Note from the Studio Binder article, Mary Sue, an idealized character who is talented at everything and has no meaningful flaw, but may have a tragic backstory. Sam Kench, 2021. But Kench also only presents 2 rules. And the first rule, Kench states, is about fan fiction and self-insertion, and is not given by SmartyFast, and is therefore not applicable to Smarty Pants' definition. An article at Backstage is a little more helpful in providing a list for the Mary Sue. In the article, author Alicia Lutes states Mary Sues are prodigiously talented at anything they do or try. They have no struggle, internal or external, conflicts resolved without obstacles or hardship. They have no weakness or flaws and suffer no negative consequences for their actions. They may have a tragic backstory, but the Mary Sue is a pure victim of it. They're attractive, desirable, and loved by everyone. Alicia Lutes. And the lack of struggle or flaw may give relation to Rule 2, but this was written 3 years after Smarty Pants' video, and is not then something Pants could have used to come up with this description. This does not invalidate Rule 2 being something Pants found in research, as Smarty Pants did also mention discussion boards in helping come up with this definition. Thus, that may be where Rule 2 came from. And it's likely that neither of these articles contributed to Smarty Pants' definition, but show a similarity in agreement on some of these points. These are all well-founded definitions by those who discuss Mary Sue's. So then, how did Marinette fare on Pants' evaluation of the Mary Sue? How well does Pants' Mary Sue test work? Well, for Rule 1, using the Wikipedia definition, essentially, Smarty Pants concludes that Marinette checks the box for Rule 1, saying that she is a good fashion designer, a video game prodigy, is asked to play Ladybug in a famous singer's music video, and has a lot of boys lining up to date. Kagami, who is supposed to be a rival, becomes her friend. Marinette is a good and overly talented Ladybug who is a prodigious genius Miraculous user. Smarty Pants argues all these points to Marinette checking box 1 for her being Mary Sue, but I do not agree. For starters, Marinette is well established as being a good designer, so there is a question of whether her fashion sense is just an established talent she has rather than something that is attributed to her Mary Sue-ness. Would it make sense, consider, for Marinette to, with an established interest in fashion design, to not win the fashion show at only her school, as far as we can tell, for Gabriel Agreste? Further, the fashion contest and both Jagged Stone's designs are all things Marinette struggles with for different reasons at first. With the fashion show, she hits a creative block and lacks self-confidence in her own craft that she has studied. Chloe trying to steal her designs is just a nuance added for audience drama and is not Marinette's conflict here. Whereas with Jagged Stone, Marinette learns that the best thing to do in an artistic endeavor is to stick to what you know instead of trying to do what would please others. And before she learns this lesson, she spends most of the episode trying to please everyone instead of making a design she would like. Before that, Marinette learns to put her best foot forward in everything after slacking off trying to be a gopher for Jagged Stone, which leads to her getting reprimanded by Jagged Stone's assistant before she finally makes Jagged Stone his glasses. As for the video game in Prodigy that occurs in Gamers, the 12th episode, according to the fan wiki order, I really don't have the time to talk about it, but I think I should at least mention for people not in the know for Miraculous, Miraculous Ladybug's episode order is insane. By this point in the season, though, it should be, and normally is, well established that Marinette makes errors and gets herself in trouble when it comes to impressing or getting close to Adrian. Thus, to me, this setup is a reverse of expectations, with Alia, Max, and the audience thinking for half a second that, oh no, Marinette is going to get embarrassed, and then spend too much time getting good at this game to impress Adrian or something, only for us to be surprised when she is already good at games. And further, this is a characteristic that sticks and is never forgotten or taken back. Later, Marinette is just good and really enjoys video games. We just did not know that at this time, and it went against our expectations for Marinette. Does this make it an out-of-nowhere success for her equivalent to that of a Mary Sue? I don't think it does. Asking to play Ladybug for the music video is the worst example that Pants mentions here. The whole reason she is chosen is because she looks a lot like Ladybug and even acts like Ladybug. I wonder why. I don't think this is a success or something that could even be attributed to Mary Sue-ness. She's asked literally to play herself at an open audition. Basically, it's kind of meant to be a joke.
You're not auditioning for the role of Ladybug, are you? Of course not. We just want to have some fun as extras in the video, that's all. I'd never do anything that could reveal my secret identity.
Marinette's attractiveness to boys is also an issue that comes into play that I will get into as it relates more to the flaw with Marinette, I think. While befriending Kagami happened in part because Marinette wants to bury the hatchet and be friends eventually, their friendship really truly happened because Kagami Wait, why was Kagami even hanging out with Marinette at that time?
Oh, shoot. So this is what Kagami was looking at this whole time. 30 tips for making friends. That explains everything. Her strange behavior, her weird questions. Kagami was just trying to be your friend.
Oh, right. Yeah, kind of easy to make friends with someone who wants to be your friend. And even then, Marinette almost screwed it up anyway. Finally, Pants references Marinette's success at being Ladybug and using the Miraculous. All of this is contradicted by Marinette's flaws, which Pants does mention as Marinette being slightly clumsy. This is something that is seen throughout the fandom, and I think it is a gross misreading of Marinette's character. Marinette is not slightly clumsy. Marinette is a ball of anxiety and self-sabotage due to her poor self-image and self-esteem. A discussion of Marinette's success while looking at her flaws as only slightly clumsy and with no reference to her anxiety or poor self-esteem is a bad reading.
Or can't capture the Akumas, then just find another Ladybug. I told you, I'm not cut out to be Ladybug. I'm sorry, Tiki.
No, don't do
Must be a high school student in real life? Wow! I told you from day one, Tiki, I'm a total klutz.
What's done is done.
Marinette's tension with her success, especially as Ladybug, is that she does not notice or acknowledge them as successes, but as failures barely avoided. She is constantly worried that Adrian will dislike her, despite the proof to the contrary that many boys would love to be in a relationship with her, despite being told many times that she is the best Ladybug in a long time, if not ever, and a great Miraculous user. Marinette is ready to quit being Ladybug the second anything goes wrong. Ever. because she does not think she is a good Ladybug. She kind of wants to quit after she drops a fucking textbook. So no, I do not think that box 1 gets a check. For rule 2, well, me and Smarty Pants agree that rule 2 does not get a check. And this one is quite self-evident if you watch Miraculous. Watch Miraculous, by the way, if you haven't watched Miraculous and are somehow watching this. For rule 3, Smarty Pants thinks that Ladybug does steal the spotlight from the villains and from Chat Noir and the other Miraculous heroes. So therefore, rule 3 is confirmed. But I do not know about that. See, Smarty Pants seems surprised that the villain will show up, seem like they are unbeatable, and then lose. Like, yeah, that's kind of how the villain of the week trope normally works, though, isn't it? The villain is introduced as an extreme advantage and then loses anyway. By this logic, then, Sailor Moon fits this role as a Mary Sue. Scooby-Doo fits this measure of a Mary Sue. The Powerpuff Girls fit this measure of a Mary Sue. Every single JoJo fits this measure of a Mary Sue. What is this rule? What is this rule? I think really the point of Smarty Pants' argument is that the other heroes, largely Chat Noir, should get more play as the hero, but this does happen. Chloe is ultimately the one responsible for defeating Despair Bear. It is just up to Marinette to let Chloe help. That is the conflict of the episode. Anansi largely focuses on Nino's ability to stand up and be a hero. Marinette is just a cheerleader for him, largely, in this episode. Marinette is also largely a cheerleader in both Riposte and the other Kagami one, which is blanking on me right now. She is not skilled enough to really fight Riposte, just avoid Riposte most of the fight. If you want someone else to banish the Akuma, that is what happens in Reflect Doll. Cat Noir is responsible for helping Ladybug chill out and enjoy the video games in Gamer 2.0. Without Chat, Ladybug loses here. Party Crashers is only saved by Master Fu and Kim. If you want a villain almost winning, well, there you go, again. Like, I do not understand the argument. It is provably wrong. Rule 3 goes unchecked, and we both agree Rule 4 clearly goes unchecked here. Yeah, this is future me coming back to add something here very quickly. I do use the term cheerleader to define Ladybug, but it is very important to note that Ladybug has never really been a cheerleader. Hopefully this is not one of the issues that Smarty Pants is taking, is that she should be one. She's also very often active in her role as leader or whatever. She's always working, she's always doing something. So cheerleader is probably not the definitive role or term to use here. Hey, wait a minute. Wasn't the point of these rules to provide a more objective definition of a Mary Sue? Because its application seems really subjective here. Like, we both disagree on our own subjective opinions. Well, I think Smarty Pants would agree, because there is not a video on Mary Sue's featuring Marinette by Smarty Pants. There are 2 videos. I mean, I guess I did not have to work so hard of keeping track of Ants's previous definitions of a Mary Sue, because it was changed a bit now. It's unclear. It's not really kept track of by Smarty Pants, it seems. Before, I did assume that the Mary Sue was a trope, but I was not given any reason to really think this from Pants, in fairness. I kind of made the assumption myself. Now, though, Pants does clarify that the Mary Sue is a character archetype, which is better for it. They acknowledge the use of the Mary Sue in fandom media as a self-insert, which is a good thing to acknowledge. Here they argue that in the case the Mary Sue not being a self-insert, though, the Mary Sue is probably bad writing. I don't know if they are changing the whole definition or just what is brought up in the last video, or if they are just adding more now that we have more time and more episodes have happened. Mary Sue is still inexplicably competent at everything, but now we look more at Ladybug, who is saving the day still pretty much single-handedly.
What? She's still whooping ass. She's still saving the day pretty much single-handedly. As I feel like in Season 4 we did see an increase in the number of times the Cat Noir comes out of an episode looking so useless and pathetic. Whereas Marinette...
So, Cat Noir takes down an Akuma almost all on his own, multiple times in Season 4 and Season 5, which are both being talked about in this video. So, Cat Noir takes down an Akuma in passion, psychocomedian almost by himself, and representation. Further, it is highly implied that without Cat Noir's help, Ladybug needs at least 5 other heroes to even defeat a basic Akuma. How is this Ladybug defeating these Akumas single-handedly? She may be the leader or the person with the plan, but she is not doing things on her own. Ever. Smarty Pants argues that putting Zhan in his place is another one of her successes because... slight spoilers, but I will be brief here. Zhan is basically so traditionalistically trapped that he is unprepared for the future he faces, not on any trapped out of time trope, but on the more complicated difficulty of having to learn the way the world now operates. Zhan's world is so far gone from his bygone era that he needs to stop giving orders and start learning how the world has changed and catch up with it. So how is Marinette finally, after taking his backseating for so long, telling him to get a grip, her success? Zhan is basically a threat that has been implied about the Guardians largely since their introduction. I won't go into massive Season 5 Miraculous spoilers, but I am really confused by Smarty Pants' Marinette always wins accusation. What would happen if she lost? Or if any of them lost? The world would end. No, literally, the show spells out that the world ends if they lose. They aren't going to lose. The heroes are going to win almost instantly. That is not the Mary Sue. That is the world is always doomed trope. And even despite the world is always doomed trope, they've lost quite a bit.
Next up on the checklist, often possessing unique talents and powers.
The Mary Sue in Smarty Pants' second video also often possesses unique talents and powers. The gaming prodigy still comes out of nowhere for Pants, and her winning class rep is still surprising to Smarty Pants, and Smarty Pants does mention they are surprised Marinette doesn't collapse in a ball every day. I do not know what show they were watching, because the show I was watching and the show I was there for was the Marinette falls into a ball every day show. She unlocks a new power giving charms, but Smarty Pants feels that this is only bragging for Marinette because the powers are useless because Gabriel defeats the charms too quickly. But the charms still have a point, though, after Gabriel figures them out. The charms still do something after Gabriel can break through their protection. You cannot like what they do, but they still do something. There was a point with them, and it was not just to make Marinette look cool.
How much further can we push this? Okay, so liked by the majority of other characters. Yes, Marinette is actually super popular. The movie tries to...
Finally, Mary Sue is liked by majority of other characters. Stays friends with an ex she has that she mutually broke up with. Stays friends with Kagami, a romantic rival. Yep, we don't want to have that happen in children's shows. That would set a good example of being friends with people who you had romantic crossing and misgivings with and being able to forgive them. So gay. Basically, all the kids like her, and the evil corporate monsters and the people related to or aspiring to be those monsters hate her. Okay, I guess that fits a somewhat description of Miraculous. Maybe Felix is missing, but that's it. What does this have to do with Mary Sue, though? That just seems like a good, if not simple, way to communicate who to root for in a kid's show. Also, once you're over 100 episodes into your show, it normally starts to become apparent who likes who and who does not. It just seems like most shows end up this way, with the villains disliking the heroes and the good guys generally liking the heroes. There are exceptions, but those are less common. And aggravating betrayal, character betrayal, arc thing. Is that what Smarty Pants wanted? Did Smarty Pants want Miraculous to have a betrayal arc?
We shit them Then we have attractive and virtuous and lacking in flaws. Okay, attractive, I'm going to skip past that because, one, she's underage. I don't care if she's an animation. I'm not playing there.
Mary Sue is attractive, virtuous, and lacking in flaws. Pants does say that Marinette has an X factor that attracts all the boys, but I don't know why that X factor has to be attractiveness. I do like the line, though, that Pants says that, well, of course she is virtuous. It's Marinette we are talking about. When it comes to flaws, the major issue starts to really show itself. Pants only gives credit to Marinette's flaws if they have bearing on the overarching plot, but not if they have any bearing on an episodic plot, or even a constant episodic reoccurrence. Again, Marinette's flaw that Pants gives little credit to her is her being, again, slightly clumsy, when the actual flaw is extreme anxiety. Pants' continued failure to see this becomes more evident when they do not understand why Marinette does not start a relationship with the boy she likes, and instead they chalk it up to wanting to extend the season. Marinette is a plenty flawed character. You can not only look at the overarching plot of a largely episodically based show to find those flaws, though. It seems like here these objective rules of the Mary Sue archetype are not very useful in giving an idea of what is a Mary Sue and what isn't a Mary Sue with any sort of clarity, as disagreements and breaking or manipulation of the guidelines and rules occurs often. Smarty Pants does, to their credit, acknowledge this by always asking for interaction and others' opinions, but it does lead to a problem. That being, if the Mary Sue cannot be so easily or objectively used or defined, it is probably not really a trope or an archetype, as those exist to be easy to apply or define. So then what is a Mary Sue? This has got me thinking. It's important to understand that my reasoning for making this video is not to shit on Smarty Pants' video, because, in fairness, the videos, in my opinion, do a lot right in the context of good faith criticism. It's just that these videos doing right this way does not really salvage them, because the concept of trying to fairly and accurately present a Mary Sue as a trope or even as an archetype, I don't think that works, because the Mary Sue is neither, at least anymore. Let's make some comparison of the Mary Sue to other tropes, even using Smarty Pants' definition of a Sue. A Sue is attractive, virtuous, lacking in flaws, and is generally well loved by the other characters, rarely makes mistakes, is generally characteristic in fandom material by authorial insertion, and often has a dark backstory. Now, as for a Mary Sue being a trope, this already, in my opinion, bodes poorly for it. A trope, in my view, should be easily noticed and defined even if it is complex. It should be hard to say that the trope is not in the media piece or is not related to the story being told. Tropes are closer to narrative devices than they are to genres or archetypes. For example, the Deus Ex Machina could simply be defined by how one notices it in media, as something that comes from the gods or author to solve a problem that would not be able to be solved without this thing. The Deus Ex Machina is applied to a piece of media directly, but the Mary Sue is not directly, it is vague. What does attractive or virtuous or lacking in flaws mean in the context of a character who is accused of being a Mary Sue? In the text. While the Deus Ex Machina has vagueness, what it is or is not, arguably the thing given by the gods, can change, and the gods can change, and the problem or the way it is presented can vary, but what the Deus Machina is in the context of the text should be apparent. The Mary Sue isn't. There are just too many ways a character could be a Mary Sue, and at the same time, ways a character could not be a Mary Sue. Again, though, to Smarty Pants' credit, they point to the Mary Sue as an archetype, which is maybe more accurate. An archetype are more guides to what a character is, but an archetype still should have a history of use in storytelling and cultural importance that leads to it appearing time and time again and again in stories. Thus, an archetype often appears as a more neutral guide, something that the Mary Sue cannot have, as there is no reason to really want to create a Mary Sue, since a Mary Sue is also a point of bad writing. Throughout the video, Smarty Pants does their best to provide good faith criticism by noting their own opinions and their own observations, and noticing that other people might have different observations or opinions. While I applaud these efforts, as they are often lacking in most YouTube-based media criticism, especially criticism of animation, I don't think it works. I think this time is instead raced it on the Mary Sue, because the Mary Sue is an insult. Smarty Pants' videos really drive my interest because Smarty Pants wants to talk about the Mary Sue in good faith, despite most others who talk or use this Mary Sue. They are doing so in the opposite of good faith. You might guess who I'm talking about. This plus Smarty Pants pointing to themselves doing research for this and their line, "This has got me thinking," really inspired me to make this video, because I'm going to have to be a little mean here, but let's get one thing kind of clear here, Smarty Pants. I don't think this got you thinking. I think this was maybe the start of thinking, but you didn't really go much further, and you did not do significant research here at all. This is not special, nor does it really surprise anyone, because only like 10%, this is a made-up number, of YouTubers do any research. But then Smarty Pants here serves as a good example of how you can quickly tell not enough research was done, even if the arguments were in good faith. Now, I have no goal of changing the standard of YouTubers' burden of research for either the makers or the viewers of YouTube videos, so I am giving two ways to find the errors of Smarty Pants' research. One easy, one slightly harder.
This has got me thinking.
This has got me thinking.
This has got me thinking.
This has got me thinking. Easy way. The easiest way to quickly do research is a Google search on the topic. Of course. In this case, Mary Sue meaning is what I searched. Further, to keep the research simpler even, I set up limitations for the research, allowing myself to only find 2 articles on Mary Sue in the first, or at least near the first, Google search page, as well as including the Wikipedia article. I would also be looking at what TV Tropes has to say about the Mary Sue, even though this is more direct search, since they did not appear on the first page of the Google search. However, TV Tropes is quite relevant here and would be worth the look for quick research on any sort of trope or archetype or whatever thing along those lines and you would want to discuss or talk about or find, especially define. I refuse to look at any dictionary definitions, but dictionary.com had a good source anyway, and I won't be going into detail on it any further. What we are looking for here is anything that should have been a red flag to Smarty Pants, that they may need to do more research or reconsider their use of the Mary Sue in their videos, i.e. make the video without the Mary Sue as a workable trope/archetype at all. So I would like to add very quickly that the 2 articles I'm going to talk about first, and both of them were unfortunately probably written before or just right before, like months or weeks off of Smarty Pants' videos. However, they have a lot in common with what Smarty Pants says in their video about the Mary Sue, so they are still worth considering for these purposes. The 2 articles were What is a Mary Sue? Character Type Explained by Sam Kench on Studio Binder, and Meet Mary Sue, A Guide to Archetype plus How to Transcend the Trope by Alicia Lutes on Backstage. Those links will be in the doobie-doos below. These articles both give a similar definition to the Mary Sue, She succeeds at whatever she tries. She is an idealized character, no weakness or flaw, but maybe a tragic backstory. They also point to the Mary Sue's origin in fandom and fan fiction, as well as pointing out its use as a primary self-insert, with Kench even going so far as to separate the Sue from good self-insertion, which Kench attributes to coming-of-age stories as being good self-insertion. The first clear red flag to me, though, is that both these articles give a list of characters that could be considered Mary Sue, something that Smarty Pants does not do in their video. There are no examples beyond Marinette. Now, there is good argument against this in that the articles are guides to other creatives looking to write or perform a piece. Therefore, examples are more necessary here. Smarty Pants' videos, though, are more of a critique of one character, Marinette, and thus the lack of examples from other forms of media does not apply as well. But this seems lacking as an argument to me. Arguably, Smarty Pants is providing a guide to other people looking to create something by providing an easier, more versatile definition of the Mary Sue, i.e. this might be more for critics. Smarty Pants even uses the term half-Sue to apply to other characters, in this case Marinette. So then it would be beneficial if they provided an example of a full Mary Sue to compare to Marinette's half-Sue. For example, I use examples of redemption when I talk about how the fandom looks at Chloe's redemption arc in my Chloe video. Skip the first 30 seconds or so. Then again, one could point out that I hate those examples from other media as comparison when they are the same constant overbearing examples over and over and over and over and over again. Example also in my Chloe video. I hate the overuse of Zuko as a guide for redemption plots. Counter to that thought, examples to other stories and characters in comparison is still a smart thing to do and not a bad idea for Smarty Pants' video. And as we go on, these examples are used in just about every other form of discussion involving the Mary Sue. This is still a red flag to me. I don't see any way around it. Sorry. The second very clear red flag is the controversial nature of the Mary Sue that both articles do not hide from. Both articles point to the often misogynistic use of the Mary Sue and the dangers of accusation often being lobbied against characters that are not Mary Sues. Not know, nor can I pretend why more clarity to this problem with the Mary Sue is not mentioned or even slightly discussed by Smarty Pants in their video. I do want to clarify, though, I do not think Smarty Pants is a misogynistic in their use or trying to be misogynistic in their use of the Mary Sue against Marinette. If I did think or see that, I would not have made this video because the Smarty Pants' video would not have been very interesting to me at all. Despite all this, I really do not know why Smarty Pants would not include any more information beyond saying that Mary Sue is a hotly debated term and hard to define. This is not enough, though. The best reason I can think why Smarty Pants avoided this is because they did not want to go into an overly long tangent and instead focus on Marinette. But I do not like or agree with this decision, if that was the decision. The way the article and even the Wikipedia page discussed Mary Sue's and the controversy around the Mary Sue should have been reason to at least pause and try to more clearly differentiate yourself from the people who yell at every female Marvel superhero to get a show or movie in the MCU. This red flag doesn't just make me think that research wasn't done adequately, it makes me question whether Smarty Pants fully read the wiki on Mary Sue's. Speaking of the Wikipedia article, let's go there. Smarty Pants. This just, Yumi. Did you even read the Wikipedia article? Did you even read the Wikipedia article from Mary Sue's? Or did you just read, the first paragraph? For starters, let's go back. Smarty Pants claims to have looked at fandom discussions. Where these fandom discussions were, I don't know. And wiki articles for their research. So, from which wikis they read, I do not know that. But the wiki I'm talking about is the Wikipedia article itself on the Mary Sue, which, after going over the origins of the Mary Sue, only talks about the misogynistic nature and the controversial use of the Mary Sue.
In the interest of figuring this out, though, I've pored over pages of discussion and wiki articles to put together a list of the most common Mary Sue indicators.
Here are some of my favorite quotes from that Wikipedia article, all of which should have been red flags for the current way Smarty Pants' videos are presented. According to Jackie Mason and Smithsonian, some critics argue that the Mary Sue opened up a gateway for writers, particularly women and members of underrepresented communities, to see themselves in extraordinary characters. Author Anne C. Crispin describes the Mary Sue as a put-down, implying that the character so summarily dismissed is not a true character no matter how well drawn, what sex, species, or degree of individual. According to Bacon Smith, the label is the most universal, denigrated genre in the entire canon of fanfiction, and may represent self-imposed sexism by limiting the qualities allowed for female characters. During a discussion between female authors at Star Trek fan convention ClipperCon in 1987, one author stated, "Every time I've tried to put a woman in any story I've ever written, everyone immediately says, 'This is a Mary Sue.'" Christine Skodari says there is a tendency within slash-fic fandom to label major female characters such as Nyota Uhura in the 2009 film Star Trek as Mary Sues because of a perception that development of the female character takes away screen time from male characters. There's more quotes I can go into here, but let's just say I left out some of the less spicy ones. Finally, I looked at TV tropes and how they talked about the Mary Sue. Let's see how they start. TV tropes doesn't get too set what the terms mean. The best we can do is capture the way that it is used. That's not a good start. TV tropes continues. Since there's no consensus on a precise definition, the best way to describe the phenomenon is by example of the kind of character pretty much everyone could agree to be a Mary Sue. These traits usually reference the character's perceived importance in the story, their physical design, and an irrelevantly overskilled or over-idealized nature. Well, that's a little better. Still, I think there is a problem when you're trying to define a thing, and the people who have spent a huge amount of their time, of their interest and time defining things like tropes and archetypes say, we can't define the thing. That should catch your attention, I think. But we'll continue. The term has started to be used in a much wider context and to mean much wider things than it once did, and there's no way to figure out which of those characteristics are necessary and sufficient to define a Mary Sue. Oh, well, there we go. It should be noted how difficult it is to define Mary Sue. Even what I am doing here is probably a feat of futility, but I want to show the value of research more than a concrete definition of Mary Sue. We'll discuss this later. In fairness, Smarty Pants did some research to see what was a Mary Sue, but they should have read more. And if they did not want to read more, they could have watched more YouTube videos? Huh? You're already here? I wonder if Smarty Pants used the Mary Sue litmus test for Marinette, or was just making their own. Okay, so one more category. I can't help quoting other YouTubers in my videos as justification for my own thoughts. These two videos I want to bring up are first Jessie Gender's Mary Sue video, and second Overly Sarcastic's Trope Talks on the Mary Sue video. Of those two videos, Smarty Pants greatly resembles Jessie's video on Mary Sue's, but even then, not well. Jessie Gender argues that the Mary Sue, as a trope, fits certain definitions that somewhat match Smarty Pants's. The Mary Sue solves the plot, grabs the attention, endearing flaws, and standout features make them seem altogether perfect. Jessie, however, and this is important, disagrees with Smarty Pants as this being a bad thing at all.
But here's the thing. A Mary Sue character isn't an inherently bad creative tool. I know.
Jessie argues that we, as audience members, as readers, as consumers of media, love Mary Sues. That these types of characters capture our hearts and our minds. While Smarty Pants does backstep in the condemnation of a Mary Sue a bit in their second video on Marinette as a Mary Sue, they do not totally agree on the Mary Sue ever being good, just a writing trap that they can understand people liking. This makes Jessie Gender separate from everyone else, even the 2 articles I mentioned, both conclude with the Mary Sue being a bad thing. And one of the articles even references Jessie Gender's video. This is because what Jessie is doing here is embracing the main problem with the Mary Sue. That being that the Mary Sue, at its core definitions, can apply to many beloved characters when applied as defined. So instead of ignoring this or trying to run from this problem with the Mary Sue, she embraces it and argues that this does not have to be a bad thing, just another tool for the writers. In the second video I want to talk about, Overly Sarcastic's Red rejects this reading. Red from Overly Sarcastic, when talking about the Mary Sue, also recognizes the universality that the Mary Sue defined as it was first recorded, as it was first seen historically. Instead, she recognizes a change in the Mary Sue's application for media criticism purposes. Red proposes that what makes a Mary Sue is when the character warps the story around them. Thus, a good way to find a Mary Sue is to look at the supporting cast and how interesting or useful or compelling they are.
Between being the hero of a story and being the center of the universe. A Mary Sue's not a character, they're an artifact of an overly centralized story, and as a result, a Mary Sue will basically never have a good supporting cast. You can't have compelling characters and side stories in a world that's all about Mary Sue, and that's what Mary Sue is.
It is apparent that Smarty Pants does not direct their definition of the Mary Sue in this way, but even if one argued they did, it would be through their third point in their first video and somewhat of their talking points in their second, being their most consistent point, that the Mary Sue makes everyone around them look terrible in comparison. I already argued against this, but I would like to re-emphasize how I do not think that there is a single fight that Marinette ever wins on her own at any time. Yes, I will answer all challenges here. I would also add that terrible is not the same as to what Red is presenting here. What she is arguing is that the supporting cast is insignificant to the plot. This is not the same thing as making them look terrible, bad, or not as important. What Red is trying to do is narrow down the definition of the Mary Sue to make it more applicable in criticism, an attempt to overcome the flaw that Jessie embraces. Using Smarty Pants' definition here just creates more vagueness. Not as directly, but it does create more vagueness compared to Red's. Because a character insignificant to the plot is something someone could point out through the text being criticized. But making others look bad or terrible at the cost of your own success, what does that mean exactly? What does it mean? Marinette and Ladybug both are never successful on their own. They constantly need the help of others to do anything. They have never beaten a villain without help. How do they make their teammates look terrible if they also make them look necessary and dependable? If you're wondering, Smarty Pants, the red flag here is that 2 well-notable and popular YouTubers known for their knowledge of media both agree on one point of the Mary Sue. Its vague definition. And they address this issue. You not only did not note a Mary Sue vagueness definition problem, but your definition did not even come in slight agreement with these two, it being itself too vague. Now, this disagreement with Red and Jessie might not be a problem if you had done your research. For example, if I were to disagree with Red and Jessie, I might say that I think
the Mary Sue is an insult.
From here, I would argue that none of the examples or definitions above given are definitions or hard enough to stop the Mary Sue or separate it from its role as that of derision and insult towards the creators of media given the title Mary Sue. Of these, there are 3 definitions that I am actively challenging here. Jessie Genders, Overly Sarcastic, which also comes really close to TV Trope's definition, and Smarty Pants, which comes close but not exact to the 2 included articles. Jessie comes the most in conflict with my definition, in that she actively tries to assert the use of a Mary Sue as a bad thing or a thing to be avoided. She does perhaps even have a point here, but I would argue even if Jessie were right, even if the Mary Sue is more of a literary tool that a writer may use, not enough people really think of the Mary Sue that way or apply the term Mary Sue that way for this definition to be applicable from a societal or understanding of people. It is unfortunate and not a good thing, but if you were to talk about a character as a Mary Sue, the point of the argument that would form from this accusation, which is what it would become an accusation, not an observation, would be on whether the character was poorly written or not, instead of how well is the Mary Sue trope used here, and why do I like this Mary Sue trope here? This sucks, because I would really like Jessie to have nailed down the definition for the Mary Sue, but right now I can only hope for this definition in the future to be more agreed on and the use of the Mary Sue. The problem with overly sarcastic is more like Jessie's problem, with the difference being that Jessie's definition is totally dismissed by the way Mary Sue is currently used culturally. Red's definition can be accepted by the masses, but it will not be used the way Red wants it to. Despite the narrowing of the Mary Sue by Red's definition, it would not be used so narrowly by others, and the use of Mary Sue would not change as Red's definition is massaged into a looser, easier to apply definition, thus echoing its current modern use, basically taking this limitation and erasing it, keeping the definition but loosening it so its application remains the same. Smarty Pants already shows how this would happen. Smarty Pants does not mean to, but does translate the supporting cast are essential to the plot, as Red uses to find who is not a Mary Sue or not, but Smarty Pants changes this to main character makes supporting cast look terrible in comparison. Red's definition, by narrowing the Mary Sue, eliminates certain characters from being a Mary Sue. But Smarty Pants' definition, well, I still do not know what this means. Looks terrible? That could mean anything, depending on who is defining those two words. Some people think you make them look terrible if you cut them in lines. Some people don't think anything makes them look terrible, or that they are already terrible, and therefore it's all fine. What is this? How would you define this? Whether Marinette's a Mary Sue or not, my disagreement with Smarty Pants' points trying to define her as a Mary Sue earlier in this video was meant to show, this subtlety, this vagueness in definition, more than prove that Smarty Pants was wrong, more show that even using the same definitions, different conclusions are being reached. Because I cannot prove that Marinette does not make the other cast look terrible or not, because I do not know exactly what Smarty Pants defines as looks terrible. Smarty Pants' definition is perfect, though, for proving my point, though, as well as the two articles, both proving an overly vague definition, as in their definitions can apply to multiple different characters across medium, but they also work well as insults, as they all find the Mary Sue to be symptomatic of bad writing, and thus something to be avoided. Both of these things, and one more item, is how I would define the Mary Sue. So, in a way, Smarty Pants provides a perfect definition of the Mary Sue as it is applicably used in society right now. That's part of why I chose their videos, because of this really good comparison. A Mary Sue has, in my definition, in my mind, 3 elements.
1. A Mary Sue is presented as a list of vague character traits that could largely be attributed to any character the person presenting the case for the Mary Sue wants. 2. A Mary Sue is considered a bad thing to have in your medium by the person's opinion of the text, and is used as proof of bad performance on someone else's part, whether that performance be directing, writing, acting, or something else. 3. The Mary Sue is draped over the person's personal opinion in a way to shape that personal opinion into a more legitimate form of criticism of the text, instead of examining this often felt personal opinion the person has towards the text.
This is not an attack on Smarty Pants. This is a nod of recognition and disappointment towards critical thinkers of animation on YouTube in general. That research on serious or important topics must be done. There are so many red flags that a rethink of Smarty Pants' video should be done in just a simple research that one could have had done in the afternoon or weekend. Even the article, which I have now made to sound like they agree with Smarty Pants, have different tones from Smarty Pants' videos. The articles of those authors are responding to the fear of the Mary Sue. It is this fear of being a creator, of your work being charged with being Mary Sue-like, that makes my definition both useful for understanding attacks and by the fear of those who were attacked. It's even in the Wikipedia article. If you have read it, you would have seen this. At 1990 panel discussion, participants noted with growing dismay that any female character created within the fan community is damned with the term Mary Sue. Editor Edith Cantor described a fan author who feared their character was a Mary Sue, although the author admitted she did not know what a Mary Sue was. Cantor writes, just as every dog is allowed one bite, so every Trek writer should be allowed one Mary Sue, to be given a sympathetic reading and critique, and perhaps return to the author with an explanation that she is following a well-to-beaten path. I don't think my conclusion could be reached by anyone other than me personally, the conclusion that is, but I do think there is plenty of evidence out there that would and should make someone pause before trying to decide if a character is a Sue or not. All of this was just from basic Google searching and well-known sites. Want to see what happens if I use Google Scholar? The history of the Mary Sue is something that should at least be somewhat addressed in every video about the Mary Sue, and I do think that Smarty Pants does address this as much as it may need to be addressed, in their second video at least. But here, it is more necessary for me to cover the Sue's history in detail. See, the Mary Sue was created by Paula Smith as the protagonist of A Trekkie's Tale. I'll spare you a reading from the Trekkie's Tale because I know most of you have heard enough. Gee golly gosh gollikers, thought Mary Sue as she stepped through the bridge of the Enterprise. Here I am, the youngest lieutenant in the fleet, only 15 and a half years old. Captain Kirk came up to her. Oh, Lieutenant, I love you madly. Will you come to bed with me? Captain, I am not that kind of girl. You were right. I respect you for it. Here, take over the ship for a minute while I go get some coffee for us. Mr. Spock came onto the bridge. What are you doing here in the commander's seat, Lieutenant? The captain told me to. Flawlessly logical. I admire your mind. Paula Smith wrote A Trekkie's Tale as a response to self-insert fiction. She was sent as an editor for something called a Zhan that publishes fan works for Star Trek. I don't know, something from the 90s or whatever. Smith was annoyed by the amount of these pieces and wrote A Trekkie's Tale to make fun of those stories. This is the basis of Mary Sue, in my opinion. Not a trope, not a writing tool or archetype, but an insult. Let's see if the academics agree with my assessment. The answer is sort of. I did not do a lot of hard research here because I wanted this to be a quicker video. Oh, man. Anyway, I only have 3 articles I found on Google Scholar and a small excerpt from a book. One of the articles I use extensively here is in fact a master's dissertation, but we'll get into that later. First, we need to go on a quick history of how academia and society looked at the Mary Sue was not always so negative, or didn't have to be so negative. Chandler and Sutter in 2007 argued that the Mary Sue was a position of power and expression that minority groups could use to represent and exploit media that otherwise denied representation to them. They take the general negative criticism and attempt to rehabilitate it, emphasizing the Mary Sue's use in empowerment, pointing out that in the original Mary Sue is a lieutenant, a person of high authority, a way to represent oneself as with more power than society allows. Regardless of how much things have changed in 17 years, one can see the importance of such an argument, a redefinition for the importance of allowing people to empower and provide a positive view of themselves where media otherwise refuse to do so in their favorite media pieces, whether they be LGBTQIA+, female, or racial/ethnical minorities. This is an important aspect to the use of Mary Sues. Zhan Li saw this power in a different way in their Canticle for the Mary Sue 2013, arguing that the Sue was important for leading to the future of transmedia storytelling, interactions between different mediums, what we are basically seeing today. Li sees that Mary Sue as being a way forward in which the use of the Mary Sue by amateurs and grassroots creators and the web are seen as being a boon, allowed to interact with pop culture in bigger tents and move artists from those industries further into bigger industries. Li argues for the need to both have these connections between pop and the grassroots, but a need to still encourage standards expected from the big name industries. Henry Jenkins, one of the leading researchers on media and fandom interactions who originally coined the term transmedia storytelling, seems to agree with Li, though some circumstantial evidence seems to point to this. I point to Jenkins' work looking at fandoms and textual posters, 1992. His look on the Mary Sue in the chapter Scribbling in the Margins, the Mary Sue, was a way in which fanfiction appears as a form of personalizing the media. Jenkins notices, though, the scrutiny towards the female original character that occurs in the response of the Mary Sue and in textual posters at least. Notes that the Mary Sue is not well received or successful in fandom designs. Thus, kind of seems to dismiss it, as Li points to the Mary Sue as being this boon of connection. It's also something to watch out for, as it is, in fact, the poor writing that could be avoided by the standards of higher industry. These views of Chandler and Sanders versus Li and Jenkins act in opposition of each other. Sanders and Sanders presenting a more progressive and encouraging view and move forward with the Mary Sue, while Li and Jenkins both push on a general view and more economic neoliberal view for others towards the Mary Sue and its interaction with big media conglomerates instead. They both argue that the future is based on how well these interactions happen will promote the future of media and how it will incorporate these writings made by their fans. Chandler's and Sanders' way of legitimizing the Mary Sue is through fair use, arguing for the justification of the Mary Sue as necessary and important of fan-made content. Meanwhile, Li argues for the necessary to allow the Mary Sue in fandom, but to keep it out of the bigger media standards. Both of these views are trying to get an understanding or make changes to what the future may hold. And we are now in that future, whether we want to be or not. Neither of these things have really happened, but neither have also not happened. Which doesn't make sense, but it also makes sense, and that's just how things work now. Chandler's and Sanders' attempt to rehabilitate the Mary Sue was denied by the present society, and largely so by critics that make use of the Mary Sue. Meanwhile, Li and Jenkins look at fandom and its interactions online, fail to understand the surveillance state of the internet, like many at that time did, and thus the understanding of how conglomerates would both detest fandom and still use fandom to produce more content and engage with their works was not a factor largely considered or criticized on. Note that none of these people were wrong in their views or their looks at the Mary Sue. The Mary Sue has moved from just being a concept of fandom or and fan fiction and been applied to industry standards and criticism, as Li was implying. Chandler's and Sanders are right in the way the Mary Sue was used as empowerment, and their efforts, while possibly in vain, were necessary and worth making note on. We are left in a spot with no real current way of looking academically at the present. So, I found a master's thesis from the Universidade de Coruña by Alexia Castro. In Sue the Patriarch, Castro argues for a disuse of the Mary Sue as a term of literary analysis, despite agreeing with past context and academic view of the Mary Sue as being useful as such analysis. Castro points to this necessary dropping of the Mary Sue due to its co-opt by the patriarchy to demonize characters and stories written by women, citing and noting how powerful writing is and giving that as why the patriarchy would want to limit women's writing. Pushing further, Castro points to the conflation between the angel of the household trope and the Mary Sue, how the angel of the household instructs perfection in women in the household and only in the household, and thus the perfection of woman in the Mary Sue is only poor writing due to the woman being perfect outside of the household. More important, to my point at least, is that Castro points to two characters largely called Sue by general audiences and critics, these characters being Hermione Granger and Captain Marvel. Despite being criticized as Mary Sue, Castro argues that both characters are not Mary Sues at all. They argue that both characters have compelling story arcs, are vulnerable, and are not always portrayed or viewed in a positive light by the narrative or other characters in the narrative. However, I disagree with Castro that these characters are not Mary Sues, because I believe Castro misused the more solid and definable Mary Sue used by academic/media criticism instead of how she is pointing to the Mary Sue being used and defined, i.e., that as a flexible tool to blindly and freely criticize female characters with any amount of agency beyond the household. Note that this contradiction does prove Castro's point to the measure of the Mary Sue and its co-opt into defense of the patriarchy. That these definitions of academic and media criticism don't really apply is superfluous, and that proves Castro right. But I argue that that Castro's points do not go far enough. Again, my point would be that if the Mary Sue was used to defend the patriarchy, which I do think Castro proves, the patriarch lost control of this animal a while ago, if they ever had control over it to begin with. And now the actual definition of the Mary Sue, defining by its use, is criticism used to legitimize the personal feelings of the critic. To show this, just look at Smarty Pants. Despite all the disagreements with Smarty Pants, I pointed out I can only really point to one point that could maybe be argued to be as use of the Mary Sue to protect the fragile patriarchy. And that is Smarty Pants accusing Marinette of having multiple guys like her to gauge how the show judges Marinette's attractiveness in the universe. In fairness, Smarty Pants did not want to touch this on a personal feeling of attractiveness or not, because Marinette is underage, and they were smarter than Cyrus still. Even then, though, I would argue that for two reasons this does not support nor was it made by feelings of loyalty nor need to protect the patriarchy. First, this one point in all of Smarty Pants' criticism regarding the Mary Sue and does not represent all of how Smarty Pants is trying to criticize Marinette. Two, and as far as intent matters, I do not think that Smarty Pants' intent is to give protection to the patriarchy. Conclusion 1, Smarty Pants' intent. Truly dissecting the criticism of Smarty Pants leads us to the often preferred use of the Mary Sue, to direct it at a character or plot that the critic feels as boring, but cannot explain why they think it is boring. Or they can see why it is boring to them, not wanting to admit that their feelings are the only real criticism they have with the media. Boring and the feeling of being bored is largely what comes from Smarty Pants' criticism and even definition of the Mary Sue. Smarty Pants points to a lack of tension and suspense from fights that seems to have foregone conclusions, and romance that they also feel has a foregone conclusion. This is the criticism of the writing as Smarty Pants sees it, not because this is bad writing, but because it loses Smarty Pants' interest. On its own, this is a good personal criticism of the work. But that is all it could be, a personal criticism. And Smarty Pants wants more from their criticism. Thus, the Mary Sue is added to make an argument for their personal criticism to become a criticism of the quality of the writing. Still, I do not think I have enough research done or proof to strongly stand by this definition I provide of the Mary Sue, and I do not know if I ever will. Thus, I put it out there to be discussed and disagreed and argued with about Hopefully by someone like Alexia Castro instead of XX Dragon. Wanna lick my lord 65XXX in the comments. Great person. I like them for subscribing to me if they subscribe to me and exist. But I do not think I will ever really meaningfully come back to this, because this is just supposed to be an example of conclusion to my intent, an example of minimalistic but succinct research. The path of Smarty Pants ending up here was less to do with quality of their review and more to do with quality of their research. Really, most of this is an experiment to see how far I can get with minimalist but accurate and proper research and still make an interesting video, and the answer was pretty far, I think. I think it is necessary to say that YouTubers cannot all be expected to do huge amounts of research for their video, especially not with the speed YouTube expects these videos to be cranked out at. However, even with a little research, you can avoid a lot of the traps that the Mary Sue presents. I would like to say to Smarty Pants, they do not have to do research for all their videos, though. Most of their videos are quick personal opinions made quickly after digesting a piece of media, and then proceeding to give their thoughts, which is a fine way to do your videos. But not if you're going to do something or go over something as difficult and as complicated as the Mary Sue. If you are doing a video on a topic beyond your own thoughts, you need to do some amount of research, but you don't have to kill yourself researching everything. A simple Google search, some YouTube videos, and a dependable site on an area of your topic, i.e. TV tropes here, can add a lot of validity and strength to your views and opinions. You can do the research. It is doable. Otherwise, what you might end up doing is simply trying to make something subjective appear more objective than it really is. This is actually my constant state. My nose always killing me and trying to make me tear it off. That's really all I have. I hope you all have a good day. Do not forget to like and subscribe. Next video will probably be longer and take longer for me to make. Yay.